What's going on, everybody? It is your boy Zamboni. I'm a musician and astrologer, and it is time to talk about the astrology of the week ahead. As always, I thank you so very much for being here. Thank you for rocking with me day after day, week after week. Thank you to everybody who continues to watch these forecasts. I super appreciate you. If you like the vibes here and you want to check out more of what's going on, I got a course coming up at zambonifunk.com. That's right. I will be teaching how to read astrology, the fundamentals of astrology. I will be teaching all of that. I feel very competent at the fundamentals, just like the basic how-to. I've done 10,000 readings, and so I know a thing or two about how to navigate a chart. And so if you are just interested in astrology, but you would like to get to a place where you can read, then fundamentals course is available at zambonifunk.com. That's also the place where you can find the music, you can find merch, you can find you can get a reading there. If you don't feel like learning how to read and you just want me to read it for you, happy to do that. You can find that at zambonifunk.com also. There's a whole bunch of cool stuff there. Go check it out. Thank you so much for being here. Let's talk about the astrology of the week ahead. So this week we've got a lot to talk about this week, but because of course we've got a lot to talk about, it's Gemini season. Gemini loves the chatty stuff, loves being chatty and talky, and you know what's happening this week. So Gemini is ruled by Mercury, and Mercury for the past few weeks has been in Taurus. Mercury this week is moving into Gemini. This is cute as hell. I love it. I love the way that this looks, especially because Venus is also here in Gemini, and also Jupiter is here in Gemini. Now, Jupiter is not super comfortable in Gemini, although at the very beginning of Gemini here, Jupiter does have this decanic dignity. I think I talked about that a couple of weeks ago. Jupiter is very far from home, but maybe in a position where Jupiter can do things that Jupiter is good at, speaking to multiplicity or the expansion, especially of ideas or ways of being, ways of navigating. Gemini is very flexible, right? It's a mutable sign, is one of these ones that's very adaptable to different scenarios and situations. Jupiter in this position is very good for finding lots of different ideas and sort of melding them together in some kind of way. And so although Jupiter, it can sometimes get lost in Gemini, and that's actually one of the problems with Jupiter in this decan of Gemini, is that you sort of run into the jack of all trades and master of none situation, where you're like never really good at anything, but like passable in lots of different ways. Or the other thing that can happen to Jupiter in this position in Gemini is like lots of talents, and I don't know what to do, and so they end up paralyzed. The image for the tarot card, the Eight of Swords, is this image. The lady who's like in the she's like tied up in the swamp in her dress and all this, and there's like swords all around her. There's a sense of paralysis, right? So Jupiter in Gemini, I like this position, and Jupiter, tends to want to help things in general, and to see Mercury, who rules Gemini, moving in and immediately conjoining that Jupiter, that just looks like Jupiter wants to say yes to the Mercury things. Mercury wants to do all of the sort of chatty or transactional or exchanging or transportation, all of the trans stuff, right? From here to there, from there to here, in between, and all of this sort of stuff. The language, the communication, all of this sort of stuff is going to be translation. That's a really good one. Really strong. Mercury is very strong there in Gemini. And then Jupiter is just going to be like, yeah, let's do more of that. Whatever Mercury wants to do, let's get it going. This is interesting because at the same time as we see that conjunction between Mercury and Jupiter there in Gemini, we also get a Venus cazimi still there in Gemini. So Venus cazimi, that's going to be Venus in the heart of the sun. That's Venus making a close conjunction to the sun within 1 degree. This is a fun one. This was Mercury or Venus moving forward at this moment. So this is the which one is it? This is the exterior, I think, conjunction. Somebody correct me on that in the comment section if you would. Venus is moving forward, moving at a pretty quick pace at this point. to see whenever I see a cazimi, I always say like it's a special message from the king in some kind of way, right? And so some kind of Venus thing is likely to come through. Venus in Gemini, I like to think about the social butterfly, or Gemini is typically very sociable, likes to go back and forth between the people and chat it up and do all of these kinds of things. Venus tends to be delicious or charming or elegant or eloquent in some kind of way, right? So this looks like a good moment to chat it up and talk to the different people and check out your ideas. Now, the thing about this, and we actually get a new moon this week also on Thursday, we'll get a new moon in Gemini, which is very closely conjunct Venus as well. So there's a lot of this like beneficent Gemini stuff going on here. Love to see it. Gemini can sometimes get a little trickstery, or sometimes get so deeply involved in narrative that it can turn into tall tales or fiction or lies or deception or these kinds of things, right? Like it's a tenuous boundary between those things. And Gemini on a bad day can turn more deceptive and more tricky. But this looks like Gemini on a good day. This looks like Gemini making sense of things, like taking all of the different pieces of information and cohering it in some kind of useful or intelligible, informative kind of way. Love to see this kind of thing. Now, and the new moon speaks to a new cycle opening up around these kinds of themes. Maybe it's going to be a month-long cycle where we're going to see the moon, the whole lunar cycle happening. Maybe we're looking at a year-long cycle between this new moon in Gemini and next year's new moon in Gemini. So we see the opportunity for lots of good information to come in and an ability to cohere that information into something that makes sense. Now, the fly in the ointment here is that Saturn in Pisces is making an overcoming square to all of this Gemini stuff. So overcoming means that Saturn is earlier in zodiacal order and therefore has it's like having the high ground. Saturn is upon the 10th, which is to say that if Gemini is rising, so like at sunrise, then Saturn will be at the top of the sky, right? So it's this sense of like Saturn has the high ground here. Saturn has authority to sort of exert influence on the Gemini stuff. Now, the Gemini stuff looks great. The ruler of Gemini is here. We've got two benefics here. We've got the sun here as well. That's very powerful. There's a lot of strong Gemini stuff going on here, but it is, when we're thinking about information and ideas and narrative and working it out in some kind of conversational way, this looks like a lot of fun, but it's going to be very important when we're thinking with Saturn. Saturn is the planet of boundaries, obstacles, discipline, heavy things, burdens, this sort of stuff, right? Authority figures frequently show up with Saturn, especially if Saturn is upon the 10th this way. So what I'm thinking about here is rigor, right? So if we're thinking with ideas, then it's going to be very important to make sure that things work out in a tangible or realistic kind of way. So this is, we can think about like one of my favorite authors, maybe my very favorite author in the world is Ursula Le Guin. You've probably heard me talk about her if you're familiar with this channel at all. She is the greatest. One of the things that I really love about Ursula Le Guin's style is that she will place you on a foreign planet where all of the rules are different, but it is internally coherent. It makes sense that, okay, so if they're going to organize a society in this way, then it would go in this kind of way, right? It feels real. It feels tangible. It's not simply a flight of fancy. It's a genuine thought experiment of what would happen if this were to go down in this way in the universe that we actually live in the land where there are no solutions, only trade-offs, or where the physical laws are the laws that we have, right? And so in that space, then what would it look like for there to be like hermaphroditic people, for example? Shout out to The Left Hand of Darkness, or this sort of thing, right? So there's so seeing this Saturn here, Saturn in Pisces, deep ocean Saturn, right? Like gets into the weirdness, right? Very good for world building and all of this sort of stuff, especially making a strong aspect to Venus, who's going to be the arts planet and interested in beauty and all of this sort of stuff. Like this looks like the sort of situation that it is most beautiful when it has the feel of something that is legitimate or real. And that is going to require some rigor. That's going to require some discipline and some hard work. So chatting it up is fun. And I would guess that like there's some good team building to be had this week while we're like talking with the different people and exchanging ideas and all that sort of stuff. But be sure that your shit is on point, because you can get knocked down by reality in some kind of